Hi everyone, this is a very short video. I'm trying to show you here how I've gone about putting a render coat back on the wall, the back wall of my clay dabbing property. The property in question is on the Solway plain. It's a clay dabbing, and as you can see here, it's faced with old brick and sections of rubble wall. But above it, when the roof was constructed, you've got concrete and concrete blockwork. So it's a real mix of materials, backings. So what I'm going to do to unify it, I'm going to put the lime mortar back on the wall. It's a very damp wall, is this. The idea being that I want the damp to be pulled out of the wall, and doing this with a hot lime mortar mix is probably the best way of going about it. Anyway, this is the process that I followed. So to begin with, the back wall was covered in a cement render which was cracking up and obviously holding back moisture in the wall. You can see bits of the render there that I've taken off, and on the back of the render you can actually see just how nasty it is. It sticks to the softer stones beyond, like there's bits of sandstone there. It had cracked, there was water behind it, and the first job was to get this chipped off. That was a couple of days work, hacking away and revealing the stone wall below. As you can see, there's a rubble section here that was pointed with lime in the past. You can see a section of brick there, and above it cement and concrete blockwork when the roof was restored 30 years ago. So it's a case now of making good. I want the surface to be even as possible, so I've raked out the joints and begun the process of filling in any holes and bringing the surface out to a kind of level backing. So some apologies at the start of this little section. I did forget to switch the microphone on. It was plugged into the camera and we were ready to roll, and I've just discovered that a little button that I should have switched across wasn't, and I wasn't recording any sound, so I'm doing a bit of a voiceover instead. Anyway, here you can see I'm having to rebuild sections of the wall that were very loose or fragile. There's a bit of a cavity there that I'm having to fill in. So you can see the mortar mix in front of me there on a mixing board. It's using hot lime with hair in it. And I'm just filling that cavity with stones to match the rubble wall that's adjacent to it. And it's a case of just filling in that cavity, making sure the cavity is completely filled, and making good. Just a brief little time lapse here showing how the wall was restored there. So there it is, that's that little section successfully patched up. The few other little bits that I had to do along the base of the wall, you'll just see the camera pan round. And there you go, some big boulders in there. That essentially is the foundations, the footings of the wall. So I was just basically trying to fill those little gaps in and get the wall in a state ready for Harling. So once I got the base of the wall completed, I then turned my attention to the little sections of rubble wall, and as I was wanting to get a reasonably flat finish overall, I had to fill out these joints within the stonework there. So I raked out the loose material, got rid of any remaining cement, got back to the lime mortar that was originally put in, and then started again just to fill in and bring out the wall surface so that it was reasonably level. I left the surface deliberately rough so that it was a better key for the subsequent Harling dashing mix. So here I am, I'm putting the mortar on, got a nice stiff mix with plenty of hair in the mortar just to help bind it together, and we're going to completely fill out this wall. So again, just a little bit of a time lapse here showing how I went about filling the joints in this rubble wall. I used little stones where there's any kind of big fissures between the bits of stone there. I used tiny little pebbles. I think they're called gallets, so it's galleting. I just incorporated these into the mortar. You just sort of ram them into the cracks and joints between. So at this stage I've got my wall in a reasonably good state of repair. You can see that area of rubble wall there. I've filled that out. I left those little keystones at the end exposed. I thought they were quite a nice feature to leave. Anyway, you can also see that old brickwork that's still intact, but all the other surfaces have been filled out, and I've got the Hessian ready to hang so that when I do start the Harling, I can actually cover it with the Hessian sheets. So here I am on the day. I'm just weighing up the weather. I've wetted down the wall the previous evening and also in the morning. I'm just checking out the weather conditions and debating whether or not to go ahead, but it looks like I am going to go ahead, even though the weather forecast is for a little bit of sunshine. So it's an east-facing wall, and I guess that once the sun goes past the midday, we get a bit of shadow. So at this stage I'm making ready to start. For this job I bought myself some disposable overalls, which actually turned out to be a little bit of a mistake, although they did protect my clothing, no problem at all, the bulk of my body. I also wore some goggles. This hot lime mix is incredibly toxic when it gets onto your skin. It can burn through. Some gloves there, which are essential. That's the hot lime mix in the dumpy bag there. It comes delivered like that. All I have to do is knock it up. In the white bag on the right hand side you can see the porcelain, which I added to this mix to make it set a little bit firmer, given that it's an exterior wall with a bit of weather. And on the left there a little bag of these are actually artificial fibres that you kind of put into the mix, so I didn't use actual hair, it's a kind of fibre. Anyway, so that's me getting all sorted out. So I got the mix going, and here I am teasing these fibres into the hot lime there in the cement mixer. I found the cement mixer quite useful for this job. It was it's quite a handy thing to have if you can use or have access to this kind of thing. So I'm teasing plenty of fibre into there. In the background you can see a little bit of that white porcelain. Apparently it's like 5 or 10% by volume that you add to the mix. And there's the wall. I've got the water spray. You can see in the bottom there. There's a bucket of water on hand to dampen things down, and I'm getting ready with the goggles to start the Harling. So I get on the gloves. Ideally I should have had some really long gauntlet type gloves that go up towards your elbow. You'll see why later on. But I've got my wet mix of Harling in a bucket, one of these big plastic tubs down at the bottom, and I'm doing the most difficult thing to start off with, which is the very top furthest corner of this building. The idea with Harling is to try and get as even a covering as possible and not have big sort of clumps of material. And I found this a bit of a challenge to begin with, but as you'll see, I kind of worked away and things gradually improved. You'll see there's plenty of splatter from this process, and in the corner there I've tried to protect next door neighbours' front door with some sheets of plastic, which seem to work reasonably okay. It also kind of on that corner there helped to prevent the wind blowing around and drying out the mortar too quickly. You'll notice there I've got absolutely no protection on my head, and when I got splattered on my forehead and cheeks and on the scalp of my head, I later discovered that that wasn't a good thing at all, and I had to go in at lunchtime and get completely showered down. But anyway, the Harling continues. It's clearly a very sloppy job, and I'm still at this stage just getting the hang of it. So I'm making a bit more progress, and as I do, I'm using a little water sprayer there just to damp things down. You can see the brickwork's dried out quite a bit. It draws in water very quickly, as well as the concrete lintels there and the blockwork above. But what I do is I wait a little bit until that dampness has pulled in, so I'm not harling directly onto wet stuff, at least not directly. Anyway, so again it's a case of getting the mix nice and soupy, and I think by now I've kind of like improved my technique a little. So I'm still on the first coat here, and it was a good deal easier on the brickwork because you could see where you've been and what was left to do. I didn't do the reveal of the window there. I've just gone as far as the outside. And so it continues, just trying to make it as consistent as possible. Doing it in little sections and making progress towards the finish of that first coat. So here's just a little time lapse showing how I completed the Harling of that little section of wall. It does go on quite nicely in this section. You'll notice in the background that the windows are completely covered over at this stage. I used just big thick sheets of cardboard and used a brick there just to prop them up in place. I also covered the window sills, little sandstone window sills, with a kind of plastic covering just to make sure they didn't get too badly damaged or covered by this mix. You can see the kind of consistency there. I notice when other people on YouTube are doing this sort of thing, they lift a little bit of mortar out and then tap their Harling trowel on the side of the bucket just to get a level tray, if you like, of the Harling mix, and then when you throw it on, you cast it on, it covers an area of the wall rather than a clump of the wall. So that's kind of what I'm doing there. I'm just kind of making sure that the mix is evenly spread on my trowel. Still a little bit rusty, particularly higher up, but I'm getting that concrete lintel covered over just now. So that was day one. I completed the first coat, and then on day two I added some aggregate, some 6mm limestone chippings to the mix, and completely went over the whole thing again. And in this little clip here I'm showing the finished result. So this is kind of day three, the morning after completing the whole project, and you can see it's reasonably consistent. It's not too bad at all. I was quite pleased with the effect. I have sprayed it down since. You can see there's areas of drying on the wall, but I've sprayed it down, covered it with Hessian, and it's a case now of just leaving it to dry. And once it's dry, I'll be doing a mix of lime wash and getting it painted with a compatible lime covering, a lime wash covering. So just by way of conclusion, I'm just showing there the materials that I use: the hot lime mortar mix with the aggregate included, the porcelain, the powder in the corner there, and the fibre. Just to emphasise, there is a health and safety issue here. During the course of doing this, I caused some damage to the skin on my wrist, and you can see in the freeze frame there just how severe the burning from the lime has been. During the course of the first day, I noticed some irritation on my wrist partway through the job, and I ended up having to deal with that. It's very, very nasty stuff. It's really essential that you wear long gauntlet gloves if you've got them, because the top of the gloves where I was working got damp, and that's where around the cuff there, that's where the damage happened. You must also wear the goggles. Anyway, this isn't a how-to by any means. It's just showing my way of working on my house, doing some lime Harling. As I said before, it's probably at the outer limit of my skill set. I thought I would give it a go on the back wall. I'm hoping that it's turned out alright, but it is a heavy job, and there are some risks, particularly to your skin and your eyes. It's really essential to be very, very careful with this stuff. Anyway, enough said. I hope you found this video of interest, and maybe if you're having a go at this sort of thing yourself, you're restoring an old property, just make sure that you don't use cement. I get the impression that in most instances you would avoid using NHL dry bagged material, you know, the 3.5, the 5, that kind of stuff. I think very much from what I've seen, it's mainly hot mixed lime. So, and keep your head covered as well, because any splatter that gets on your skin, I use a buff there, any splatter that gets on your skin is really harmful. Okay, enough said. Hope you've enjoyed the video. If you found any benefit in it, please subscribe to the channel. Hit the like symbol if you've found any, if you've enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for looking in. Bye for now.